All right, you ready to do it?
Yep.
All right, here we go. So 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, folks, welcome back to the podcast. I am very excited to have as my guest today, Andrew Daniel. Andrew, welcome.
Hi, Guy. Thanks for having me.
You are welcome. So Andrew is an award-winning author, spiritual teacher, and director at the Center for Cinesomatic Development. He's a founder of Cinesomatics, a feeling-based therapy utilizing video feedback and movement to assess and resolve stuck somatic, psychological, and emotional patterns. This work is held online and in person internationally, from New York to London, Tuscany to Switzerland. His latest book, Awaken to Your True Self, is recipient of the 2022 Gold Nautilus Book Awards. This definitive guide helps self-aware entrepreneurs, artists, professionals, and leaders break through stuck cycles and genuinely wake up. In addition, and I want to ask you about this, Andrew, you're also an active advisor to the official Alan Watts organization. Pretty cool. All right, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
All right, man.
It's good to be here.
Awesome. Before we get going, share with our listeners where you're from originally and where you are currently.
Well, I was born in Central California, and I grew up in upstate New York, south of Buffalo, and I currently reside in Nashville, Tennessee.
Okay. So let's get into this. How did you get into this field?
It's been a long journey. The short story of it was that when I was young, I was bullied and teased a lot. I had warts on my hands, and that set in motion about at least a decade of dealing with bullying, teasing, being made fun of, sitting alone at lunch, just a lot of social and emotional angst, trauma. And that set in motion a desire at about 17 years old to do whatever it takes to figure this out, to do whatever it takes to not want to kill myself, to not want to seek revenge, to not hate myself and the world and my life. And from there, I was thrusted forth on about a 15-year journey. And this was a journey of healing, of transformation, of awakening, of personal development, of business development. Yeah, I had a software company when I was 18. I wrote a particle effects and physics engine to create special effects. And so I ran that company and created that software. But during that time, my passion became more and more about the healing work because I saw how much my life improved learning and growing and facing all of my internal demons. And so that eventually, that software company eventually closed, the market changed, and I started on my journey of facilitating, of actually being somebody who was taking the stuff that I learned in my life and applying that to others and helping other people heal and break through what was going on in their life. So that's my story in a nutshell.
Okay, even that little bit is really interesting. First of all, the whole bullying thing. I mean, I was bullied myself. A lot of times people easily just kind of dismiss that and say, well, oh, you were bullied, I'm so sorry. It jacked me up. I mean, it really just impacted the trajectory of my life in many areas. But for you, you said kind of just offhandedly, about seeking revenge, about thinking about taking your life. So were those things that you actually were thinking about? You were thinking about committing suicides?
Yeah, I mean, I was bullied and teased to the point, I was crying myself to sleep at night. They call it FOMO now. We just called it, back then I just said I was unlovable. No one liked me. No one wanted me. And it was probably not as bad as I thought it was then, but back then it was my whole life and it was happening for 10 years. And so it was it it was really painful.
Did you get
And
help? Did you seek help? Did you
no,
get help? Did you tell you didn't tell
no,
your
we
parents?
my parents knew. Yeah, okay, so let me change that. My parents knew since I was young, and they helped once they realized after first and second grade that kids were making fun of me. Their parents were saying, "No, don't touch that guy. You're going to get warts." All this silly stuff. I told them. Eventually, they had my warts. We tried to freeze them. We tried to burn them, and eventually, they use a laser to
Oh
take
my
them off.
God.
And during this time, I didn't know this then, but during that time, I was really taking it personally. I was really feeling sorry for myself, and that was an origin of my victim mentality. Sure, I was a victim to bullying, but I played my part in it as well. I didn't know it then, so I was complaining to my parents, and they did everything they could. They had no context. They weren't bullied like this, and the teachers didn't help. And if I told on the kids, it would make things worse. My dad was really great. He said, if they punch you, you can punch them back, but you don't throw the first hit. And I was like, that's fair. Unfortunately, they never threw the hit. And so there was really no way for me to defend myself and to really claim that sense of power. So I really struggled with that. I even had teachers laugh at me. Not all of them, but some of them. And so we didn't have a lot of money. And it was actually a blessing in disguise, because I think that if I was put on antidepressants, on any of these kind of pharmaceuticals, that would not have been a good thing for me personally.
Right.
So, yeah, we didn't really have the resources. I was very smart as well. I was very intelligent with a high IQ. And so we had a couple psychologists kind of evaluate me. They're like, yeah, he's really smart. We don't know what to do. And so they tried to put me into more advanced classes. I didn't want to do it because it just was more homework and work. I just wanted to play. So there was this conflict of being not fitting in intellectually, not fitting in physically, emotionally, and with the bullying, the home life wasn't perfect. So there was a lot of stuff going on. And yeah, I didn't really say to my parents that I wanted to go in and shoot the school up or kill myself. But I sure fantasized about it, and I sure thought about it. But I never acted upon it. The truth is, I was too much of a coward. It sounded way too painful. So it was, all right, well, if I'm not going to do that and I have to be around, then I have to be willing to do whatever it takes to figure this out. And so that really was that 17 years old turning point where I've dedicated half of my life to this work.
So at that point, you started to do what?
I literally got on the computer and typed in how to be cool onto Google. How to get girls to like you, how to make friends. And it wasn't too successful, but what it did is that I found some things. Looking back on it, it was not the best, but I did find some things that got me different results. And what that did was give me hope. It showed me that I could do something to change my life. I didn't have to stay a victim. I didn't just have to deal with the cards that were handed to me. I could do something about it. I could change how I felt, how I responded, how I talked, how I showed up in the world, with very, very, very basic self-help books, introductory ones, How to Win Friends and Influence People, Think and Grow Rich, some of these very classic self-help books. But what they did was they showed me that I could do something, and I no longer had to be at the effect of the world. I could be at a cause for my life.
So you got to a point where you were like, you just sat down at the computer and said, something's got to change. That led you to these books, which in turn gave you hope. How do things unfold from there?
Well, from there, I moved around a bit. I started my software company when I was 18 years old, and that was entrepreneurship. No one in my family were entrepreneurs. We were blue collar, lower middle class, and I just had to learn. How do you start a software company? I mean, this was 2006. This wasn't like This wasn't like, hey, welcome to YouTube. Do you want to make $1,000 a day on the internet? I had to figure this out. And there weren't frameworks right now. If you want to create software, you could like drag and drop templates. There was none of that. I had to learn how to code by hand. I had to learn how to code by hand. And so along with that learning of the software, I had to learn about business. And that was a perfect tie-in with the personal development, because there was a lot of, well, how do you learn how to run a business? Well, how do you learn a successful business? Well, how do you market? Oh, well, when I start to market, I'm coming across limiting beliefs. I get afraid. Oh, I'm not confident. Oh, work on that. So it all started really tying in together. And so that, along with being an 18-year-old, I also wanted to get better with women. And so that was also another track of that, of, well, how do you talk to women? How do you not be sad and scared and pathetic because nobody likes you, because for 20 years of your life, you were at the bottom of the social food chain. So I was learning how to become a better person. I was learning how to interact with women and make friends, and I was learning entrepreneurship. And so that was like consumed my whole life.
During this time, Andrew, were you experiencing, how did the effects of the bullying show up in your life? You talked about limiting beliefs and so forth. What did that look like?
Yeah, I was unlovable. I was unwanted. I had low self-esteem. I was afraid people were judging me. Then I was judging other people, and then I tried to be superior to them. I was like, oh, well, the jocks are the bad guys. And so I abandoned athleticism, and I was like, oh, well, mind over matter. So I started to rationalize, and it's like, well, it hurts really bad to be rejected. So let me, become superior. Let me be smarter and have revenge of the nerds fantasies. And talking with women, I was like, how could they possibly want me? And so it was just an astronomical amount of things that came from 10 to 12 years of poor socializing in school.
So what happens next? You start this the software business. You're starting to learn about being impacted and influenced and inspired and given hope with these books and knowledge. How do things unfold from there?
Well, from there, I started learning more, I would call therapeutic, more healing modality stuff. So I was not a fan of school. So as you could imagine, being in school was terrible for me. So I didn't go the traditional route of education, becoming a therapist, a psychologist, social worker, anything like that. I did it all outside of school. And I started finding things like NLP, hypnotherapy, different alternative, more holistic ways of healing. And so as I got into those things, I was like, oh, like it blew my mind. Nobody taught me any of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it really made a lot of sense. And so I read more books, I took courses and seminars, and eventually I started to make the shift between just being a consumer, a client of this work, to realizing, oh, I'm actually really interested in doing this for other people. I want to help other people because this saved my life. This stuff changed my life. And so that set me on a journey for about 10 years. I was homeless twice. I eventually started teaching things around relationships and sexuality and spirituality that I was learning on this 10-year journey. As I said, then I was homeless twice, living in my car in LA. My business shut down because the market changed. I was trying to make it in this field of being a coach, a consultant, more of a freelance facilitator, so to speak. And I had some amazing accomplishments, and then I failed. I was struggling with scarcity and poverty, and I had a really rough time. So it was very confusing because here I was, my software company had clients like Whole Foods, Samsung, Disney, Walmart, British Telecom, Sony Pictures. And I was also learning all of this spiritual and psychological and medicine and healing, all of these sort of life secrets to become the best person you could be. And yet my life was working less and less and less.
So, first of all, Andrew, I want to say that I really appreciate you sharing all this. I mean, you are amazing. There's no doubt about it. Your story is friggin' incredible. I mean, what you went through, however long that was, 10 years of bullying was nothing less than traumatic. Of course it was. As you were learning and diving into this literature and knowledge, can you share with us specifically something that helped you and how it helped you?
Well, the biggest thing and the first thing was going from being at the effect of life to the cause of life, going from a victim mentality to a responsible, empowered mentality. That was the first thing that literally said, oh my God, you're telling me that I could be the cause of my life rather than being blown around by the wind of life. And from there, without that piece, none of the rest of the stuff could have happened. So that was probably the first and foremost thing of, oh, I'm not a victim. Things happened to me that I couldn't control. Absolutely. Was I a victim to that stuff? Absolutely. But am I identified as a victim? Do I live my life in this victim mentality, blaming everyone else for what's happening to me? No. Well, I was for 21 years, but after that, I had to start taking responsibility. Even if things were out of my control, I said, all right, well, I can control how I respond to this. I can control how I'm perceiving this. What if I'm distorting all of this? What if these people that are laughing at me aren't laughing at me, and I'm just so scared and I take it so personally that I then turn it into whatever it is, an attack.
Mm-hmm.
And so that really was probably one of the most important things that I've learned that set me on the path of reclaiming all the power I gave away throughout my life.
And as you progressed in this learning, you said you wanted to share and teach and help others. What gave you the inspiration, the power? How were you able to turn it around and say, you know what? Not only can I help people or I want to help people, but I think I can do it. Because there's a big difference, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that leads me to the rest of my story and where we come here today. So as I said, despite doing all this transformational work and healing work and therapy and psychology, I was studying quantum physics, I was studying everything I could. And despite my successes, I was homeless and I couldn't make it work. I couldn't do that. I couldn't figure out how to make a living from helping people. I could figure out a living how to have a software company, but I didn't want to be behind the screen my whole life. I wanted to do this, and I tried to do it, and I failed at doing it. So this eventually led me to what I'm doing now, which is very, very different than those things. So what ended up happening was I had an encounter with a mentor who had an approach to healing, of transformation, that revolved around moving in your body and recording that. And so I had an experience with this man who has passed away, and what I saw was nothing short of terrifying. What I started to see was all of the stuff that I learned in my head wasn't actually embodied within me. And so what I mean by this is I had this image in my mind that I was a great person, that I learned all this stuff, that I was smart, that I was outgoing, that I was friendly, that I was gracious, that I was generous, all this stuff. And then I see myself on video, and I saw someone who was passive aggressive, narcissistic, who was manipulative, who was scared, who was shameful, who was hiding. And I said, oh my God, this is why my life isn't working. And so that sent me on the last part of my journey for about 7 years. And that led me to actually breaking through all of that stuff, to doing all of this shadow work, going into the depths of facing the darkest parts of myself, to eventually forming what I call Cinesomatics. And this is the work I do now. So that big breakthrough from I wanted to do it, I tried to help people, I thought I knew it, but it wasn't working because I couldn't make the business work, because I was also homeless trying to do it, and who's going to hire someone who doesn't have their life together, to a very successful business. I have an award-winning best-selling book. I have a healing modality called Cinesomatics. I'm making a lot of money. I have a great relationship. My life is finally working. And from that place, I've been able to help hundreds of people personally and tens of thousands of people through my books and my work. And that all came about through the work that I do now, through realizing and recognizing that it's not enough to figure it out in your head. It has to happen in the body as well.
All right, we're going to dive into that. But before we do, you mentioned that you had an encounter with a mentor who put you on video. And from that, what's exactly were you doing on the video that enabled you to see all these horrible, less than stellar things about yourself?
Yeah, so let me first talk about Cinesomatics.
Okay.
So because that'll paint
Okay.
the picture.
Okay.
So Cinesomatics is my approach to transformation that is based off of video. So that's the cine part. So cine also comes from movement, right? Kinesiology, movement, cine, kina, and video, cinematography, moving pictures, right? So you have that element, and then you have somatics, which is of the body. And so what we do is we have people move. So it could be anything. We have people dancing. We have people shaking their hands. We have people expressing archetypes through their body. Anything. I have a workshop where people walk on a slack line. It's this tightrope, and we film it. And so what we do is we get people moving. Rather than talking about our problems, we just get people to move in their body. Then we film it. We have very high-end cinema equipment that we film this with. Then we have that client and myself or the group sit down and we play the video back. And what I do is I go into more of a feeling place. So rather than a heady analytical place, I go down into more of an empathic feeling place. And so I start to give them feedback about how their movements feel. And they get to see it for themselves on video. So it's a very remarkable process because you're getting a feedback. There's a feedback loop. You're getting evidence for the feedback that I'm saying. Mm-hmm. So rather than it being a guru, an expert, some authority that you just have to trust that they know what they're doing, you're actually getting the proof for yourself in your own body on video. So that's a similar process that I went through myself.
So would the prompt, for example, be, okay, Guy, move? Or what would the prompt be for me to move?
Great question. We have stuff for everything. But one of the most basic ones that I do is archetypes. So what I discovered is that we know in psychology that the mind represents things in pictures, sounds, feelings, senses, things like that. So if I say, think of an elephant, think of pizza, think of a pie, there's maybe a smell, a flavor, an image, a sound that comes to mind. This is known. What I discovered by doing this work is that the body has that as well. The body has its own somatic representation. Sometimes it matches the mind, and sometimes it's different. And if it's different, in every single instance, the client has trouble with that thing in their life. So understanding this, one of the prompts could be, all right, Guy, so what's one of the things that you struggle with most in your life? like a 1 or 2 word kind of concept.
Worthiness.
Perfect. All
Feeling
right.
feeling unworthy.
Great. So what I would do is I would say, all right, guy, in your body, find the feeling of unworthiness or worthiness. We'd probably do both. And I would say, with movement in your body, without speaking, show me worthiness. What does that look like?
Are you are you gonna inviting me to do this right now?
If you would like, you don't have to, but it's just
I
an
I,
example of the
I
prop.
would. I'm not gonna do it. I would
Sure.
love to do it, but I'm not gonna do it right now
Sure. So, but
because
that would be an example
yeah.
of what it would do. And so you can imagine that you have a camera, right? And you're in front of this camera doing this movement. So it's very vulnerable, it's very exposing, and you could probably imagine that right away stuff starts coming up. You start feeling stuff.
Right.
And from that, I start reflecting back what it is. I would say, all right, so you're moving your hands, you're moving your body, showing me worthiness. Well, what does this feel like? Well, notice all of a sudden, all of the emotion starts coming up. There's shame or guilt or sadness or remorse, regret. And then that starts the whole healing process. And the client and you get to see that for yourself on video. And that feedback loop starts the transformation.
Wow. This is very intense.
Yes.
I mean, it's very intense,
Yes, it
and I
is.
can see how obviously this opens up the whole Pandora's box of trauma and so forth.
Yes.
But for example, the prompt of, okay, Guy, show us worthiness and then an unworthiness. How do you contrast and work both of those together to bring out?
Yeah, great question. So, for example, one of the things that we discovered is something called reverse wiring. This is evident when you see people that keep attracting abusive relationships, right? We know some guy, some girl who keeps attracting the same kind of partner that treats them poorly. And it's like, why don't you just find someone good? And they think they are. That's an example of someone who considers love abuse and abuse love. They probably grew up in a household where they were abused, so that abuse feels like home to them. It feels like love. And their nervous system literally gets what we call reverse wired. And an easier example is, let's say something like giving. So if I were to say, show me giving, what would that look like? And someone would usually, like, let's say, put their hands out. Well, that's properly wired. Giving looks and feels like something coming from you to somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
If instead of putting my hands out and offering something or giving in that direction, if I took my hands out and pulled them into me and closed my fist and brought them into my chest, that looks more like taking or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And if the prompt was show me giving and someone did a motion that looked like taking, that's reversed wired. Now, that person in their life, if you asked them what giving and receiving was, they would give probably an accurate definition if you asked them with words. But having them do it in their body reveals the reality of how they interface through that concept in the world. And so you can see that when people come in and they say, I'm doing all of the right things. I'm being a good person. I'm being kind. I'm being generous. And I still get treated like shit. Well, they come on. I say, well, show me those things. And without a doubt, every single time, there's massive dysfunction in those things. And it becomes very clear why that person who keeps doing what they think is the right thing keeps getting the wrong results. It's
So
because they have
incongruency.
Exactly.
Yeah, a lot authenticity, inauthenticity, congruency is coming up for me. This is incredible. So
Yeah, it saved my life. Yeah, it's amazing.
What specifically, how did it save your life?
Well, I was homeless twice and I couldn't get out of it. And I was smart, so I was conning myself. I was lying to myself. Without seeing my own shadow, without seeing this stuff in my own body, I was so trapped in my head. I was so caught up in fantasies. I was so caught up in delusion. I literally was homeless, going around doing these affirmations of I'm so wealthy, I'm so abundant, and I remember having to transfer 30 cents from one bank account to another to afford a can of soup one night while I'm pretending I'm abundant. I was in complete denial and in fantasy, and without seeing the truth for myself on video, I would have, who knows where I would have been. It would have not been good.
Okay, so let's just bring everyone to your website. Here is cinesomatics.org, cinesomatics.org. We'll have that linked up at the show notes page at the traumatherapistpodcast.com. So how do you work with people? What do you offer?
Yeah, so the first step really is my book. So I wrote a book. I got it right here. It's called Awaken to Your True Self, Why You're Still Stuck and How to Break Through. And this was the book that I wrote after the 3 to 5 years of doing this work for myself. So the process that I work with people with, I've gone through it all myself. I do this stuff every day for myself. So one of the problems I've had with a lot of therapists and teachers and trainers and facilitators, coaches, they don't do it themselves. You can go to school and learn all of this stuff and have all of this stuff still running, all this dysfunction, all this trauma, all this limiting beliefs, negative emotions, all these things. And for this process to work, you actually have to have done the healing process yourself, or else you can't see it. So for example, what happens is if you are codependent and you don't realize it, your clients that are codependent that come in, you're going to enable them because you think they're doing the right thing. And so you're going to keep a codependent client stuck if you're also codependent. So I had to go through all of this process myself. And through that journey, I realized there was a set of things that helped me break through when none of the prior 8 years of therapy and transformation self-help work failed. And so I wrote this book, Awaken to Your True Self, to share these concepts that were the things that actually broke me through, even after 8 years of therapy, healing, and transformational work. So, long answer to answer your question. How I work with people is first I have people read the book because that book lays the foundation of a lot of the principles we use in my work. And so how I work with people is one-on-one. So I have an assessment. It's an embodiment assessment. That's the first thing people will do. So in that, we do some movements. You get a taste of cinesomatics. We get on a call. You don't have to share much. You share a little bit about yourself. I have you start moving. We film the movement. We sit down. We play it back. And I tell you all of the things that are running your life. And for most people, it's very confronting.
I want to play
Sure.
devil.
Yeah.
Why should I trust you to tell me what
Great.
you're seeing in my life?
Great question. You don't. You don't have to trust me because we have the video. You'll get to see it all for yourself. That's the magic of it. And devil's advocate to myself also is, I've been doing this for 15 years. I've dedicated my life to it. I've gone from homeless, suicidal, almost homicidal revenge feeling to having real joy. I'm out of suffering. I've helped hundreds of people do this. I have countless testimonials. So there is proof, evidence. My bank account reflects it. My relationships affect it. My body reflects it. My life reflects it. My work reflects it. I've ensured that I spent and dedicated my life to being somebody who actually embodies this stuff before I teach it. And I continue to do so.
That's awesome. All right. So someone who, I could just imagine a lot of listeners like myself are like, this is incredible. The book is Awaken to Your True Self. We'll have that linked up. People who are interested in working with you, you recommend that they or require that they read the book first, and then what?
Yeah. So if you go to andrewdaniel.org, that's my personal website.
Okay.
And there is a link to the book. So you order the book, hardcover, paperback, audiobook, Kindle, whatever you want. It's a big book. It's about 13 and a half hours of an audiobook that I narrate myself. It's about 430 pages. So it's a substantial book. If you read that book and you're like, this is exactly what I need, then you just go to my website and click Embodiment Assessment. And there you can schedule a 2-hour Cinesomatic session with me, and you'll get to experience this for yourself. From there, I have workshops, we have retreats, we have long-term programs, and it becomes the beginning of a whole new way of moving through the world.
Wow. Andrew, what's the best way for people to reach out to you? Is it cinesomatics.org or Andrew Daniel?
It's andrewdaniel.org. So
Okay.
Cinesomatics is all about the actual modality. So you just get a lot of information. You get to see demos, testimonials about the actual process.
Yeah.
And my website has my book and other stuff that I do.
Okay. Awesome. Well, sir, love to have you back at a later time. You are so inspiring, and I really appreciate you taking the time to share your journey, man. This is really exciting. Looking forward to getting this out there.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
All right.
Thanks
take care.
And thanks for the great questions too.
I appreciate that. All right. Take care.